My name is Sumiko Saulson, and the essay is called Elements of Horror in Toni Morrison's Use of Magical Realism and African Folklore. As you mentioned, this essay was reposted as a blog post on Mocha Memoirs Press, and it has also won a second place award from the Carry the Light Foundation. And here's an excerpt. Born Chloe Ardelia Wolford in 1931, Toni Morrison is one of the most prominent voices in African American literature. The best-selling author has won the Nobel and Pulitzer Prizes and earned an enduring place in American hearts and minds. She's become a staple of college English literature course curricula in her own lifetime. Although her works often defy genre classification, respectability politics has her firmly ensconced in the literary fiction genre. She is the darling of critics in the academia. Horror and supernatural fiction are considered low-class, tawdry genres. They sit in a dirty little niche with romantic and erotica. Genre prejudice is so deeply ingrained, many refuse to recognize a horror story when they see one. Toni Morrison's Beloved is an American Gothic horror story, a ghost story set against a backdrop of slavery and the post-Civil War restoration. It takes on the tone of Gothic horror immediately with the line, 124 was spiteful, full of a baby's venom. Referring to 124 Bluestone Road, the protagonist's home. The venomous baby is Beloved, petulant spirit of the 2-year-old daughter Seth they murdered to protect her from the threat of slavery. Haunted old buildings have a life of their own in Gothic horror. American Gothic horror takes place during the Civil War and Restoration, which are concurrent with Britain's Victorian age. The dark history of the African slave trade, Native American genocide, and white guilt are central to the genre. Hence, wronged Native peoples and oppressed African slaves are the boogeymen. Start by saying that although I am predominantly a writer of fictional work, I am also a journalist, and I've been a journalist since I was in high school. I was on my high school newspaper, which was a daily paper, the Daily Bugle. So I started out writing in journalism, and then as I went to college and studied, because I got an AA in English with creative writing, I start to become more and more acquainted with, academic essay writing, as it was required for a lot of the coursework that I was doing. And indeed, this actually started out as something that I was doing for a college class, which was an essay about the Toni Morrison work, Sula. But as I had been, also really, really, really involved in the horror writing community, and often had been asked, as an African-American horror writer, about Black people writing horror, because a lot of people felt, well, Black people don't write horror. Horror is a genre for, older white men. And since that was a feeling that a lot of people had, I had to explain to them that, yes, indeed, actually, Black people do write horror. And here are some books that are horror that Black people write. And, in the case of Toni Morrison, Beloved was one of the, earlier works to receive a bunch of recognition and win a bunch of awards that was clearly actually a work of horror, as it is a Gothic horror story and a ghost story. So I was very interested in that particular subject, and most of the essays that I write are pretty much related to things having to do with being Black and writing horror, or Blackness in general. So yeah. Well, the first thing that I do is I try to figure out what sort of, what am I trying to say here? So that is sort of what you would call the thesis of the essay. So a thesis sentence usually goes at the beginning of an essay and explains to people what you're trying to prove or disprove. So, the angle that you're going at, what you're looking for there, it usually comes pretty close to the top of it. So I don't think I put it exactly in the first sentence in this particular essay, but I think that it is actually pretty close to the top of it. So what I was trying to establish is that Toni Morrison, in fact, could be considered a horror author. So that's how this breaks down. And so this particular thesis is that because Toni Morrison is considered to be a literary fiction author, and because Toni Morrison is a darling of the critics and the academia, people refuse to consider the possibility that a work by someone like that, who is so elevated, could be horror, because horror is a low-class genre. So actually my thesis is in two sentences, the last sentence in the first paragraph and the first sentence in the following paragraph. Usually I would come up with an idea of where I'm headed with the thesis, but then when I do the research and I start to pick up evidences, I might in fact edit or revise the thesis statement at a later time, because perhaps the evidence doesn't support it. Yeah. So an essay that I thought was really well written was by Tananarive Due, and it is called Jordan Peele's Us, Black Horror Comes Out of the Shadows. One thing that was done really well by the author was to connect her personal history as a Black woman in America to the subject of the essay, thus drawing the reader in. She talks about how Patricia Stephens Due, her mother, was a civil rights activist, and connects Blackness and the erasure of African American people by removing them from horror, to the commentary about the horror of erasure, and how horrifying it is to not be present in these stories. Very well connected. The subject of the Black experience, and particularly the experience of dark-skinned persons, and how it is important that there is not only Black but dark-skinned Black representation in movies like Us by Jordan Peele, and how these things are really, 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 really turning around the narrative about horror. For in the past, horror was something where we, as the other, were scary, and we were a threat to good white Americans. Now it's turned around where we're actually the ones that are in danger, threats towards us. So it actually really, 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 really all supports the conclusion or the thesis. And the thesis is that it is actually our turn now to tell the story of how we experience horror and what's scary to us, instead of it always being about how we're scary to them. So I thought it was really well put together. Oh, I would ask her how she was able to just really, 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 really stand up for herself as much as she did. I saw the documentary, The Pieces That I Am, that was about her life, that came out just shortly before she passed away. And throughout it, you see how she was asked by her editor, her friends, her publisher, a whole bunch of people that were really close to her as a writer, to stop writing about Black people. And she was told that she could get famous if she would just start writing about white people, make her books about white people. But she held her position that whole time and did not allow them to talk her out of it. And I think that requires just a tremendous amount of strength. So I would be like, how did you have the strength to just persevere and ignore all these people telling you that you need to stop doing what you really wanted to do? Where did this courage and the strength come from? If you're a college student, then you probably have to write on a topic that is going to be relevant to whatever the course you're on or the coursework is. However, under that umbrella of potential topics, there will usually be something that holds your own personal interest strong enough for you to actually really, 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 really flesh out and complete a work that will hold the interest of an audience. Because when you're interested in something, then you will write about it in a way that is interesting. And of course, if you do so, you're still going to have to do research. So